Welcome, Brittany.
Hi.
Hi, I am really, really excited to talk about our four-part series on birthing trauma, birthing experiences. You're going to be our first story talking about your birthing experience with both of your kids, the trauma that kind of comes along with that, and then, excuse me, we're going to go into my experience too in another episode. And then we have two incredible guests that are going to be joining us throughout the end of our episodes. So why don't we just start and tell the audience a little bit about your birthing experiences, because yours isn't just the birth, it's also the pregnancy. And so much happened during both of those options between pregnancy, birth, and then after.
Yeah.
I think it's so important to provide our listeners some of this experiences because they might be going through the same things.
Yeah. So we'll start with pregnancy, right? Because that's the beginning of it. With my pregnancy was flawless until 33 weeks, when I could no longer walk because I had such bad sciatica. Like I was using my grandpa's walker trying to get around. Because my waddle
Yes, was so cute.
It was so bad. And I thought personally that the waddle came from the belly, which I believe it does. However, I was still waddling up to 2 weeks after delivery.
Wow.
With my first.
Now, did you have back problems prior to your pregnancy?
Yes.
Okay. So do you think the two go hand in hand?
I do. I think most of it, from what I've understood, is that because I was a cheerleader and very flexible, the relaxin hormone that comes into your body when you're getting ready to deliver, it releases your muscles. And because I was already so like hyper mobile and my nerves were just moving around like no other, and that caused a lot of sciatica pain. And so I ended up in PT after my first, and then once I got pregnant with my second, the waddle and the pain started at 8 weeks pregnant.
Wow.
So
that's early.
It is early. So clearly was not even like showing yet, but in pain to the point where I started physical therapy during pregnancy and then continued it after pregnancy.
Wow. Wow. So, we've been friends for a long time, so I'm pretty familiar with your pregnancy, birth, everything for both of the kids. For the audience, when did you know that there was a problem during your first?
It's interesting how you asked that question because I never recognized it as a problem. Like I just thought it was a thing. And so when I went in for my 34-week checkup, the doctor asked me how I was feeling, and I said, I just feel a little off. Like I was 34 weeks pregnant. It's the end of July. It is hot. I just got back from a bachelorette party where I had walked miles and miles and miles, trying to keep up with everyone and failing miserably. So I didn't feel any worse than a normal 34-week pregnant girl should in the summer.
Or what you thought.
Or what I thought. Yes. Like I wasn't very swollen, nothing. I just said I felt off. And that coupled with my blood pressure that was just about 15 points higher than it normally was, which my blood pressure is always like 120/80 on the dot. So no concern. So it really wasn't even like that much higher. It caused him enough concern to get my blood drawn. And so the blood work came back 2 days later. He made me go directly to the hospital to get more blood drawn because my liver enzymes were high. And as I'm sitting in the hospital, just waiting for a blood, I told my husband, I was like, hey, I got to go get my blood drawn. I'll be right back. Literally, I was also disgusting because I had laid out at a pool all day, and it was the end. And so I was coming home to shower.
Mm.
And I was still in my car, and I just was like, oh, I'll go right now. So I turned around and went to the hospital, and it's like 2 hours in and nothing has happened. But my blood pressure is like 150 over 100 at this point, and they were like having the high risk doctors come down.
Oh, wow.
And I'm still like there by myself because I refuse to tell my husband that something is wrong, because I'm just like, no, it's 34 weeks. It's too early. Nothing's going to happen.
I'm getting my blood drawn.
Yes. I was very wrong. So about the 3-hour mark, they said, your liver enzymes are 3 times higher than normal. Your blood pressure is incredibly high. You have preeclampsia.
Wow.
Which, for those of you who don't know, just means that you could literally seize out at any time. And the only way to stop preeclampsia is to deliver the baby.
Wow. What would happen if they didn't find out that you had preeclampsia and you ended up delivering and waiting till 40 weeks? What are those high risks?
Yeah, high risk. I probably would have died.
Wow. It's
Still
terrifying.
thinking, like, no, it's no big deal.
Yeah.
Like,
so, I mean, for me, I remember when you went in, because your husband was keeping some of us pretty well informed on what was going on. I didn't know the challenges and risks that come with preeclampsia, but I knew it wasn't good. And so I know I was nervous. And I know we've talked in the past that you were not.
I was not. I don't know why I was not, but maybe because we didn't have anything packed for the hospital. The baby room was not ready. Like, he was still working on the floors in the nursery. Like, I couldn't have a baby at that moment. But of course, anyone who has ever had a baby knows that it doesn't usually go according to plan.
I'm pretty sure that, because I know you're very regimented with your plans, and this has to happen first before that. And I'm pretty sure I remember some advice that I gave you many years ago and said, you don't get to decide when you get pregnant.
Yeah.
It was, okay, we're going to get engaged, we're going to get married, we're going to have a baby. And so I just, it
and none of that went to plan at all.
Nope.
Like, we found out that we were pregnant a week before we got engaged. Yes. And I was like, this is not what the doctor said was going to happen. They said my birth control was going to last a lot longer, and it did not. Oh. And maybe it was because of all of that, I actually did not create a birth plan at all.
Oh, okay. Honestly, I thought you had.
I did not.
Because I didn't have one either.
No, I did not, because maybe because I am a planner, I was afraid that if I had planned it, knowing how pregnancies can go, if it did not go according to plan, like, could I actually handle it? So I was like, it is going to be what it is. I know I want an epidural. I don't care about all of that. Like, I want to be comfortable, and that's it.
And do you think, because I'm very similar the same way, do you think that the mothers who create plans, because they never go according to plan, I would bet to say maybe only 1% go according to plan. Do you think that that's why mothers freak out so much in the hospital, because they have this strict regimented plan? And it doesn't go that way?
Yeah, I think that could add a lot of stress. I mean, any of my plans that don't go according to plan stress me out. And this one is not something I am very educated in. And so, like, when I put a plan together, it's because I know what I'm doing. Yeah. I do not know anything about birth and delivery. And so I did not feel equipped, in which maybe that is part of the problem, that I didn't feel equipped enough to be able to make a plan. In hindsight, I am glad that I didn't have one, because nowhere in my plans would it have been to have a baby at 34 weeks, stay in the hospital for 5 days, and then go to the NICU.
Yeah. So, okay, let's talk about that really quick. So after you found out that you had preeclampsia, what happened next?
So I never left the hospital after going to get my blood drawn. They moved me to whatever the room is for labor and delivery. And that night, it was a Friday, I remember Steve did not stay with me. Like, my husband left. And in hindsight, I would never do that. So, like, if I have any advice, like, don't be left alone. That night prior to delivery was traumatic for me. I had to get steroid shots in my buttocks to help develop the baby's lungs. And then in that moment, I should have been like, oh my God, my baby's lungs aren't developed. Like, what's happening? And so they give you 2 shots, 12 hours apart. I never made it to the second shot. So then after the steroid, they had to give me magnesium because that is the medicine that you have to be on for preeclampsia.
Okay.
It can prevent the seizures, but because of that, you are on bed rest. And so because I was on bed rest, I needed a catheter because I could not go to the bathroom by myself.
Yes. Yes, and catheters are no fun.
No fun, but I've experienced it before. So I kind of knew what I was in for. I knew it would be painful in the beginning and eventually I wouldn't feel it. And that was not the case. I felt it for 2 hours after. So they went in and they like tried to do something. I can't even remember what it was.
Mm-hmm. Maybe reposition it.
Yeah, something. And they were like, how's that? And I'm like, nope, still feels the same. So they came to the conclusion that wherever my baby was sitting in my belly could have been affecting it. So they took it out and I ended up using a bedpan for like 3 days.
And bedpans suck.
They suck, but like what was hard for me was I peed so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to be able to go without having to ask for help and then get them when I was done so they could dump it out and clean it.
So did they essentially say, okay, anytime you have to pee or use the restroom,
call me.
Call me. Yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah. And so from my experience, working in the hospitals, which feels like forever ago now.
I forgot you did that.
Oh gosh. They want you to ask for help.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to say 8 times out of 10, that bedpan is spilling. Okay. It's spilling either in your bed, on yourself, on the floor, somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Bedpans are not easily to like hold. You definitely need generally 2 hands sometimes, especially when it's full.
Yeah.
And so for our listeners, as embarrassing as it can be, we'd rather say, hey, let's help you at least get you off of it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people can put yourself on it yourself. But at least let's help you get off of it.
Yeah.
Or you sit up a little bit, we'll pull it out so that it doesn't spill all over the ground or all over the bed. And then we have to clean you up and clean the sheets. And oh God, it's a mess.
I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just sucks.
It sucked. But like, even with my pregnant belly, like I just was able to do it and they let me do it once they realized I was capable.
Yes.
And so that was really nice.
There's a level of trust that comes.
Yes. So that was great. After that part, I did not sleep very well because they were in and out checking everything like every 2 hours. And then the morning came. My husband finally got there, like with, all of the things you need to take a baby home because we're still that naive that we did not realize she was going to go to the NICU for a week.
Yeah.
And so we're like, oh my gosh, we have all of these things we have to get ready. And he brought it all to the hospital, packed our bags. Because the only thing I had was a list. I did have a list and he walked around the house getting the list ready.
Brittany and Steve still didn't even have a name for baby yet.
Oh no. She didn't have a name like for 3 days after delivery.
Oh, right.
So they started Pitocin at 11 a.m. and they expected it to be about a 24-hour labor process.
Okay.
It was not. It was only 12 hours. But during that 12 hours, they had to give me a Foley, which was the most painful thing I have ever experienced.
Yes.
And then I can't even say that because I feel like so many parts of this
were
process were so painful. And they asked me if I wanted medicine, and I was like, no, I probably shouldn't be taking drugs while I'm pregnant. And 10 minutes later, I was like, give me all the meds. Like, I needed it. And I think my husband was thankful that I took it too, because I was finally able to sleep. Mm-hmm. Like, that was the first time in like 24 hours I had fallen asleep. And then she came less than 12 hours after Pitocin. Like, I started at 11. She came at 11:12.
So when we talk about, I'm going to interrupt you just for a second. You had preeclampsia. Was that ever found anywhere in your family, your sisters who's given birth? Nothing?
No, like they So they told me after the first time of preeclampsia that I had no symptoms. Like sometimes they can tell by your medical history, your body weight, your height, all those things, your age. They were like, you had nothing. And that is why you pee in a cup every single time you go.
Really?
Yeah, they're looking for
Oh.
they're looking for protein in your urine because that is a sign of preeclampsia.
Wow.
So other than the high blood pressure in that moment,
And you never had high protein in your
no,
urine?
no protein,
Wow.
only high blood pressure that one time, and then my blood pressure was, I guess it stayed pretty high. But it was just my liver enzymes were 3 times higher. And so they said for sure you're going to take baby aspirin with your second. And after you can start taking aspirin after 12 weeks. And so with my second, I took baby aspirin. And my blood pressure was not that high, but again, at 33 weeks, it was slightly high. I don't even think it was 15 points higher than the normal. And he's like, it's slightly higher than your norm, so we're going to just run your blood because of your history. And again, my liver enzymes were 3 times higher.
Is it normal, do you think, for it? So are you more
like prone to getting it?
Yeah.
No. I mean, I think yes. Everyone I've talked to is like, no, because I know someone who had it and then didn't. Like, they said it shouldn't, just because I had it the first time doesn't mean I should have it a second time. And because I did, they called me a head scratcher. Like, we do not understand why you, in your condition, your health, have ever had preeclampsia.
Wow.
And then to get it twice. And so they said I for sure would get it again. Like if I decided to have another child, I would for sure get it again around, especially because it came up 33, 34 weeks at the same exact time. And they even said that they would up my baby aspirin dose if I were to have another baby.
Did they advise you against having another baby?
They did not. They did not. They said because we can kind of expect what to happen, we can prepare for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So essentially they're pre-planning.
Yes. They said the longer you wait, obviously with any, women, but going to some women now will have babies up until like 40. We've seen that. They advised against that.
Okay.
He said if you were to have another baby, do it within the next year because it will just get harder and harder on your body.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you had baby. Baby number one.
Baby number one.
Baby number one came out as a preemie at beautiful 34 weeks.
Yep. 4 pounds, 4 ounces.
Gosh, so small.
And she got whisked away to the NICU as soon as I had her. And when you're on magnesium, you can't hold your baby. And you're still on bed rest for another 24 hours after delivery. So I couldn't see her. But also, like, I almost didn't want to see her because after delivery, they came in and were about to whisk me off to emergency surgery.
Right. I forgot about that. Okay, so what happened? So you gave birth naturally. So like vaginally.
Yes.
Vaginally. Yes. Baby is being taken away to the NICU, and all of a sudden the doctors say, hang on, there's something wrong.
Yeah, and I could never tell you what time frame this all occurred in. Like, to me, it felt instant. Steve was on his way down to see our baby in the NICU, and somebody stopped him and was like, you need to go back up there. They might rush her into surgery. And they said, we think your epidural is still working, so we're just going to try to scrape out these blood clots.
Okay. Do we know why your blood was clotting like this?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I feel like we never talked about the blood clots again because preeclampsia was there.
Gotcha.
So like that we talked about the liver enzymes because my liver enzymes didn't stop at 3 times higher. Like they drew my blood after baby came out and they were still rising, which is normal.
Okay.
For that. But, and eventually they came down, like they would take my blood again at the doctor's office after I left the hospital. And they came down, but them scraping those was the most painful thing. Like, I really do think of all of it was that was one of the most painful things. I remember squeezing Steve's hand and screaming, and I do not think my epidural was still working, but that was painful. Luckily, I did not have to go into surgery because the doctor came in and was like, whoa, like everyone else was freaking out. And then the doctor came in and was like, well, let's make a rational decision. Let's look at the clots using an ultrasound.
Okay.
And they said that the one had already looked like it had decreased, so we're gonna just monitor.
Okay.
After that, I could not tell you what happened.
So with the magnesium, with the surgery scare, with just having a baby, with being scraped, of course your body just went through all this trauma and you're exhausted.
Oh, so tired.
So, I would actually retract your previous statement of like not even wanting to see baby, because I don't think it has anything to do with that. All of a sudden we kind of go into, just like any type of trauma response, right? You kind of go into freeze.
Freeze, for sure.
And I don't even think you thought of it.
No,
it's I need to sleep.
I need to sleep. Like my body cannot handle anymore, and I'm done.
Yes, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I remember that Steve was able to convince the NICU nurses to bring baby up.
They got to, so within 24 hours afterwards, they brought her up to me, and you're not allowed to hold babies on magnesium, just in case you seize out and drop the baby. So they both stood next to me and they put her on my chest, and I could at least hold her for a second. And I remember feeling very grateful and thankful and, okay, I'm exhausted. I just want to go back to bed, because they woke me up for that, which, in hindsight, like, yeah, my body was through a very traumatic experience and I did not recognize any of that, probably because I was just in my freeze the entire time, like just trying to survive everything that was happening.
Yeah, and if you think about that whole entire scenario, the trauma wasn't just on you. It was on baby, but then it was on your husband too.
Yes.
I can't even imagine what was going through Steve's mind as he's running to go see his beautiful new baby in the NICU and getting called back because you might have to go into emergency surgery. Have you guys ever talked about that?
We have. He said it was the most terrifying thing he's ever experienced. And again, it's almost like I took his words very lightly because I didn't feel that. It didn't feel terrifying for me. But I also was so out of it, I had no idea what was going on. So that's actually the first time it hit me that I took his words very lightly and not realizing how much it could have impacted him.
It's a good opportunity to bring it up again, actually.
I think I will.
Yeah. And, acknowledge.
Yeah.
So once she was in the NICU, how long was she in the NICU? 5 days?
6 days. So she was only in the NICU for 6 days.
Okay. And they have to do that car seat test before they can leave.
Yes. So if you stay in the NICU for longer than 4 days, I think, you have to do a car seat test where your baby goes in the car seat for 1 hour.
Okay.
Attached to all of the heart monitors. God, talk about trauma. Like, I didn't realize how much those heart monitors could affect you. And then especially when you're the one holding your baby and they go down because you're not holding your baby correctly. And then you think, how am I supposed to take this baby home without monitors?
And not know.
Like, what if I'm the one that caused it? Because the second the chin dips, the baby will stop breathing. And so I was terrified of all of that. But she passed her car seat test after an hour, and then we were able to take her home. I did not have the same experience with my son.
Yeah. So was the pregnancy with your son easier or harder?
Harder, much harder. I still never got sick, never threw up. I was a little more nauseous, but like the back pain, sent me into PT, which it was also extra hard because my husband was gone for a good amount of the first trimester. And so navigating a dog that just had ACL surgery and finding sitters for...
Did you have Bo yet?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we had both dogs. I had to find sitters for after work so I could go to physical therapy twice a week. And it was just overall exhausting. It was also the first year back in school fully after COVID.
Yes.
Which, if you ask any teacher, that was the hardest year that they've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was pregnant at the beginning of the school year until the end. It was really rough. And so the pregnancy sucked. I was prepared for preeclampsia. They did not think I was going to have it, but I did have it again at the same time. Unfortunately, I had to have a C-section this time because he was breech.
Yeah.
And it was just...
It was more rough.
It was more rough. He stayed 5 weeks in the NICU.
It's such a long time.
Yeah, and then to like not be able to drive for 2 weeks, I needed somebody to take me to the NICU, and then I could barely walk up the stairs or to the elevator to get to the NICU. It was, I'm not having any more kids.
Yeah, and gosh, Callie is 5.
Yes.
And Harrison is 2.
2.5, yep.
He'll be 3. And they are so beautiful and so sweet and so smart. And I remember you telling me that because when you have preemie babies, that they are younger?
Oh, like the corrected age.
Yes.
Yeah, so when they do their milestone checks, they don't look at it as like their birth age. They look at it as their corrected age. So how old they would have been starting at like 33 weeks was not the same as if they started at 4 weeks. So both my babies' corrected age was about 2 months earlier than their birth. But they never had any milestone issues. But I am seeing, more anxiety with my son, in terms of like sleeping, attachment, and all of that. And now that I'm doing my work around trauma and understanding how it works, like I realize just being a baby in a C-section experience is traumatic for your body. Like there is pre-verbal trauma, and he got both of them. He got the C-section being ripped out of his home, mm-hmm. and then ripped away from his mother to go into a NICU for 5 weeks.
Living in a little
tube. With as much connection as I could give him in the 8 hours a day that I would go there. But then I'd have to come home and be a mom
to
my other daughter.
Yeah.
So...
And he was on a feeding tube
for 5 weeks.
Yeah. And he struggled with taking the bottle and all that. And so, I mean, that's hard for all 4 of you.
Yeah, it was. And like it blows my mind with like how maternity leave works, because technically, right, I only got paid for 6 weeks postpartum.
You had to take sick time or something too, didn't you?
Oh yeah, to get my 6 weeks, we have to use our sick days. Mm-hmm. So I took the 6 weeks, but like at 5 weeks in a NICU, then you're just bringing a newborn home.
Yes.
And you have to start that, like they don't, it's just, they think the body, luckily I had 8 weeks because I had a C-section, but like you're just bringing your baby home. There were mothers in the NICU who her baby was there over 12 weeks. And, well, yes, I believe it was over 12 weeks or right at the 12-week mark. So she had already gone back to work so she could take her leave when her baby came home. Because talk about trauma, this mother had twins, lost one.
Oh my gosh.
Because they were born at like 24 weeks.
Wow.
And like the NICU will not keep your baby after 40 weeks. They will send home, right? Because that's when you're technically supposed to have been born.
So what do you do
So
with
if there's something going on, whether it's, they'll send you home with oxygen. They'll send you home with a feeding tube. They will send you home with these resources to keep your child alive if your baby has not graduated from them before or after 40 weeks.
They wouldn't move over to the ICU or something like that, or some other... Wow.
Not if it wasn't like that detrimental.
Yeah. All right, so she had twins.
Mm-hmm. Lost one.
During birth?
Yes.
Had one in the NICU for 12 weeks.
Had to go back to work.
She took what? Let's call it a couple days.
Well, I think legally she had to take 6 weeks for, like, you can't go back to work without your doctor's note.
Yes.
And that's a 6-week or 8-week.
Depending, I think it would depend on what do you know what she did?
No.
Yeah, I think it would depend on what she does too, right? I mean, if you're just sitting there at a desk, right, which would be different as a teacher or any type of manual labor. Say she worked in data entry. Mm-hmm. There's probably ways around that if she was thinking, okay, hey, I need to go back to work so that I can retake my leave in a couple weeks when my baby comes home.
Whereas my work would not let me without a doctor's note. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of...
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I think we started to uncover too a lot of things that we get to talk about with our future guests. Mm-hmm. I cannot wait. Do you now, looking back and remembering a lot of the trauma, do you now say, wow, this was actually a big deal? Because I know you were saying that you felt like, okay, well, this is just what's happening.
As a story, it sounds like a big deal.
But you still don't feel it.
I don't feel it. I don't feel it. And I wonder if that's because I was just in survival mode and in freeze the entire time. But
and our number one focus becomes the new baby in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I have talked to women who are like, my birth experience was traumatic and traumatized me. I don't feel that. And I think if anyone heard the story, they would think differently. But I never went to someone who was like, yeah, I had a traumatic birth experience. Mm-hmm. Whereas lots of women have come to me saying that.
Yeah. And I would agree with you. You were most likely in freeze, where a lot, we disassociate and we separate our feelings from what's actually happening. And you remember the story. And I think a lot of you remember the steps.
Yeah.
But you don't remember the feelings that are involved in that. And so I would agree with you. You were definitely most likely in freeze.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for going down memory lane with me. I'm really excited for our future episodes and diving into postpartum depression and, the problems that we face in the hospitals or the medical industry when it comes to moms, African American and Black moms, and trying to figure out how to create change for the moms. Because I think, one of the things that you brought up is that your doctor felt that I'm feeling a little funny.
Yeah.
And decided to take that step and do a test for preeclampsia. I think a lot of the Black mothers or African American mothers or people of color don't get that. Mm-hmm. They don't have that support in their doctor where they're not asking those questions or saying, oh, well, you feel a little funny? Let's just take a test to figure it out.
Right.
So I think the biggest thing is speaking up, right? Your speak up was, I feel a little off, and sticking to your guns too. Yeah. Making sure that we really talk about how we feel. So I'm really excited. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week on Resilient Moms. Bye, everyone.